In 100 yards, turn right onto Dover Road. Turn right onto Dover Road. Continue for 1.5 miles.
From scratch since Brexit. It'll cut tariffs on imports of wine and make it easier for 18 to 35-year-olds to work and travel in Australia. But the deal's expected to add little to Britain's long-term economic growth, and critics have warned about the impact on British farmers. In the city, the FTSE 100 will reopen at 72.60 after closing up 89 points yesterday, and the pound buys $1.33 and €1.17. LBC weather mostly dry and cloudy, some frost and fog in places, sunshine for parts of Scotland, and light winds for most, a high of 12 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
Here's something that will pop your mind. Humans evolved from primates, growing up notable thumbs just to pop their lips. Tongues the exact shape to fit them, and thousands of taste buds just to taste them. Yes, humans were made for Pringles. You were made for Pringles. True story. Pringles. Good popping. This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Morning, 3 minutes after 7 on Friday, December the 17th. In a moment, we'll go to our political editor down in Shropshire for this shock by-election. An extraordinary defeat for the Conservatives. What does it mean for Boris Johnson? What does it mean for the Conservative Party? Full analysis of that. In other news, what does this news from Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, mean to your wallets and purses?
Well, we have to take the action that we think will do the job to address and tackle inflationary pressure, particularly in the medium term. We just have to do that, I'm afraid.
First rise in interest rates for 3 years, but what will it actually mean? What is it meant to bring about? That's later in the hour. Now, even line of duty Superintendent Ted Hastings is calling on the Met to take action about these parties in Downing Street.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph, led by the wee donkey. Who exactly does the Metropolitan Police work for, man? Our citizens? Or Boris Johnson?
Certainly sounds like the actor to me. In other news, it's a lockdown by stealth. Deserted city centres, half-empty pubs, theatres having to close, but they won't actually say the words. And more on that story.
In 300 yards, keep right to continue towards Tuns Lane, A355.
By 2 women, revealed yesterday, he denies the allegations.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84.
Keep right.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Since it was created in, I think, the 1830s, the Conservatives have never lost the seat until the early hours of this morning, when they took a battering. Let's go straight to the location. LBC's political editor Theo Ashton joins me from Shrewsbury, where the count took place. Theo.
Until about 3 hours ago, North Shropshire was as safe a Conservative seat as they come. The Tory majority when Owen Paterson was MP, just shy of 23,000. But then this happened.
Morgan, Helen Margaret Lillian, Liberal Democrats, 17,957. Conservative Party candidate, 12,032.
The swing from the Tories to the Lib Dems, 34.2%. That is the second largest swing of its kind since World War II. Helen Morgan, the new Lib Dem MP, put her victory down to anger of the Tories, particularly over the number 10 parties.
Tonight, the people of North Shropshire have spoken on behalf of the British people. They've said
In a quarter of a mile, at the roundabout, take the first exit onto the M4 slip road to London, Heathrow Airport.
it will be scrutinised, it will be challenged, and it can and will be defeated.
And from the start of the night, it looked like a Tory defeat was on the cards. Speaking to reporters afterwards, the Conservative candidate Neil Shaftesbury-Hurst admitted it had been a difficult campaign.
We've run a positive campaign here. I'm extremely proud of the work that everybody's done. Of course, it's a disappointing result for us. We're 11 years into a Conservative government. By-elections are never an easy thing
That's
to
not
do.
the reason for this, though, is it? It's the sleaze and the scandal.
If you let me finish your question. But of course, we do need to reflect upon the result, and I'm sure as a party we will do that.
Now, this morning's result marks the end of a terrible couple of months for the Prime Minister, which started, of course, with his decision to support Owen Paterson after he was found guilty of breaking lobbying rules. That backfired, and then we had the non-stop revelations about the parties in Downing Street and a Tory campaign headquarters. But until now,
In a quarter of a mile, merge onto M4.
PM's credibility in the eyes of voters. That's obviously changed. Boris Johnson is not Teflon after all. As Edward Timpson, the Tory MP for the next door constituency of Edinburgh, told me, the Prime Minister has to get back to his agenda that won the Tories a record 80-seat majority 2 years ago.
It has been a very difficult night, and the circumstances coming into this made it even more difficult. So we're sorry that our candidate Neil has not got over the line. So we have to accept that. It's midterm. Governing parties and by-elections often find themselves on the wrong end of this sort of result. But we do need to
Continue on M4 for 5 miles.
by residents in North Shropshire.
From speaking to voters here, the anger is palpable. Boris Johnson, in their eyes, needs to clean up his act.
Especially here, there's been a complacency for a long while, really. And I just feel they need to pick up the rear, really.
Normally vote Labour, but I'm very keen to change things. I want things to change around here and feel like I need to put my vote into the party that are most likely to win today.
I voted
In 2 miles, at junction 4B, exit towards M3, M23.
JL partners who ran polling in number 10 when Theresa May was Prime Minister. Let's look at the dent that the Conservatives have taken, if we can, James. A little over 31% is what I'm hearing. Were that to be replicated across the country, what might we be looking at? Morning to you.
Morning. Well, we'll be seeing pretty much a Lib Dem landslide. It's never sort of good practice to do this thing, as you say. It is a by-election, but it will clearly be a very diminished situation for the Conservatives and seats if this swing came against the Lib Dems, or if the seat kind of swing came against Labour. Now, I don't think we'd expect this to happen. We can't extrapolate that easily, but this is clearly a very seismic and very problematic result for the Conservatives.
What were you picking up in the industry in which you work? I mean, I have to say that I was told that it had gone away. The size, though, of the defeat, does that surprise you?
It does surprise me. I think certainly we're always going to see a slightly bigger swing in this seat than we were in the by-election a couple of weeks ago. In all makes it synced up. But this is a very, very significant result. It's one of the biggest, not only one of the biggest by-election swings in history, it's the second biggest swing against the Tories and the Lib Dems since 1983, and the second biggest overall. I've got so many stats in there, I won't bore you with them all. The key thing is that
Give me the top two. Give me the top two numbers you want to pull out, James.
well, it's the third biggest swing against the Tories in any by-election since 1945, beaten only by Christchurch in 1993, which obviously you know how that ended up 4 years later in Tony Blair's landslide, and Clacton in 2014, which is when Douglas Carswell ran against the Conservatives. So it's a very, very significant result. We often say, don't read too much into by-elections. They're one contest, they're in unique circumstances. I think the size of this swing and the fact that there was no particular local issue really shows that it's problematic for Boris Johnson.
Lastly, humiliation for the Conservatives, joy for the Lib Dems. We must just touch on Labour. They wouldn't have think they would won it, but they'd be disappointed by their result, wouldn't they?
I think we need to be not too unfair on Labour on this one. In these seats, in these by-elections, voters often know it's a two-horse race, and they often go for the party that would be the most likely to win. So don't read too much into Labour's support. What is true, though, is that Labour does still have significant brand issues across the country as a whole, whether on the economy, whether on immigration, whether on leadership. Yes, voters are very critical of Boris Johnson, but they are still have a big question mark over Keir Starmer. And if you're the Conservatives trying to take a modicum of sort of good news from today, that is about the only thing you can say.
James Johnson, thank you, co-founder of the polling company JL Partners, running polling. Number 10 Downing Street when Theresa May was Prime Minister. Here's another one I've just brought out, actually, but I won't detain James. The turnout is big down in Shropshire. And I reckon people turned out because they're so bloody furious with this government over parties and lockdowns that they have you another name. Just 33.5% turnout in Old Bexley and Sidcup a couple of weeks ago. 46.3 down in Shropshire. They were determined to make their voice heard, weren't they? All right, so what does it mean for the Prime Minister? Well, he's still not accepting that effectively we are in a lockdown by another name.
We're not saying that we want to cancel stuff, we're not locking stuff down, and the fastest route back to normality is to get boosted.
You walk through any city centre at the moment and see the reality. Plus, Mr. Big from Sex and the City, Chris Noth, has been accused of sexual assault by 2 women. He denies the allegations. A full report after this. 7:16 LBC News headline, Simon Conway.
The Liberal Democrats have overturned a huge Tory majority to win the North Shropshire by-election, piling further pressure on Boris Johnson. 4 children have died in a house fire in Sutton in South London. Nightclubs in Wales will have to close from the day after Boxing Day as part of new COVID restrictions to tackle the surge in Omicron cases. LBC weather dry and cloudy for most, a high of 12 degrees.
LBC travel line to our web. Long delays on the M3 northbound to junction 4A at Farnborough. Those overnight roadworks are still taking place and only one lane is open. In Cricklewood, the A5 Edgware Road is closed both ways and that's following an accident. Blackfriars Bridge is closed northbound for emergency works and there are delays from Southwark Street. In Buckhurst Hill, the High Road is closed both ways after a burst water main, and in Sutton, Collingwood Road stays closed in both directions after a fire. In Peckham, it's very busy on the A2 Old Kent Road westbound northbound, heading up towards Malt Street, a bus has broken down, and on the underground there are minor delays on the Victoria and Circle lines, and Mansion House, Gooch Street and Holland Park stations are all closed.
LBC. Omicron COVID-19 is spreading fast. Every adult in the country now needs to get a COVID-19 booster vaccine because 2 doses do not give you enough protection against catching Omicron. Boosters give you the best possible protection against the virus and should significantly reduce your risk of serious illness and hospitalization. Strengthen your protection and get boosted now. Visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccination.
Call Nick Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973 LBC.
This Christmas, nothing's stopping us, so enjoy it with all the trimmings. Selected carrots, parsnips and sprouts are just 19p per pack with your Tesco Club card. Now that's a generous helping. Tesco, every little helps. Majority of larger stores for regular prices, see tesco.com. Club card or app required, ends 26th of December.
Omicron COVID-19 is spreading fast. Every adult in the country now needs to get a COVID-19 booster vaccine because 2 doses do not give you enough protection against catching Omicron. Boosters give you the best possible protection against the virus and should significantly reduce your risk of serious illness and hospitalization. Strengthen your protection and get boosted now. Visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccination.
Hi, I'm Alice, part of the Crisis at Christmas team. If we've learned anything from the pandemic, it's that everyone needs a home for our safety and well-being. This Christmas, you can give someone who's homeless the
In a quarter of a mile at junction 4B, exit towards M3, M23.
helping people to find somewhere to call home. No one should be homeless and alone. Please donate £29.06 today. Search Crisis at Christmas. Thank you.
Omicron COVID-19 is spreading fast. Every adult in the country now needs to get a COVID-19
Exit at junction 4B, then keep right at the fork.
give you enough protection against catching Omicron. Boosters give you the best possible protection against the virus and should significantly reduce your risk of serious illness and hospitalization. Strengthen your protection and get boosted now. Visit nhs.uk/COVID vaccination.
Nick Ferrari and breakfast on LBC. Call
In 2 miles at junction 4, use the left lane to take the A408 exit to Uxbridge, Heathrow Airport.
Taken by the Conservatives, all down to Conservative sleaze and these parties that might or might not have gone on, one possibly involving the Prime Minister. That leads me neatly to the front page of the newspapers. I'll give you some of the updated ones on the web in just a moment. Let me take you one through the printed ones so you know roughly what's going on. Tories turn on Whitty is the front page of the Daily Mail. This is a growing number of Conservative MPs who suggest that perhaps he's taking too much control. I would remind them that advisers advise, ministers decide, so if they don't like it, they actually hold the reins of power. Professor Whitty does not, and they could influence it. Other news, Queen sets example by calling off Christmas party. You may remember earlier this week we were all rather glad that it was going on, but not now. That's also the front page of the Metro. Queen cancels Christmas lunch. The front page of the Sun is a good story. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. This is, as I said, if you go to city centres. I was in London through the afternoon yesterday. Restaurants that would normally be absolutely patterning on the walls, half empty, half full, whichever you prefer. Similar theme for the Eye. UK shuts down in bid to save Christmas. These parties, which are, I think, undoubtedly played into the Conservative defeat. And Daily Mirror very much in the vanguard there. Cops quiz party pair. That's the one that was held with the mayoral candidate Sean Bailey. That was the one that broke earlier this week. Now this is an interesting line on the front of the Guardian. If it's true, Boris Johnson joined Number 10 staff for a party in Downing Street during the first lockdown in May last year. It is alleged, raising questions about whether there was a culture of flouting the rules over a number of months. The party chairman, Oliver Dowden's with us later in the hour, will put that question to him. Very embarrassing for Rishi Sunak, who went to the United States and has now had to race back. The Times reports he will be in talks on a bailout for pubs and restaurants. Why would that be necessary if there's no lockdown? Why would they need that? So clearly they do realise it. The Financial Times quite rightly goes with a money story. Bank of England bowing to
1/4 mile at junction 4. Use the left lane to take the A408 exit to Uxbridge, Heathrow Airport.
A couple of the newspapers are doing for the Daily Express. Bruised Boris suffers setback as Lib Dems steal victory. For the Daily Mirror, the party's over. Lib Dems hand under fire Boris Johnson. Brutal defeat. The Guardian.
Use the left lane to exit at junction 4, then use the middle lane to keep right.
Here we are. The Daily Mail. Sorry, now I'm rustling papers, but there is on this here. Boris's by-election battering. So that's we said. Let's feature some of the text tweets.
Use the middle lane to keep right.
We're going to ask what it means for Boris Johnson later in the show. I think in the first hour it's just a general reaction.
Continue on M4 for 1.5 miles.
Albert in Croydon, this is a warning and a wake-up call to Labour, who thought they were more popular than the result proves. Honestly, I would have thought in Labour HQ they wouldn't have seen this particular seat in Shropshire as one that they would realistically want to get. They might be a little bit disappointed by how their vote has come down, but obviously the hangover really is around the Conservatives for a point. This comes in from Priscilla. This is a knee-jerk result since one of the Lib Dems done anything. Never. That will continue. If it were a general election, it would be a Conservative win, and we all know that. And this from John. It's been a long time now. Boris is being moved down the road. The replacement will be a very quick honeymoon. I'm sure that means. Okay, more on that in a moment. Now, we will, of course, as always, reflect other stories. And an interesting idea is concerning our schools. An army of retired teachers to be recruited by the government in an attempt to keep schools open in January. This announced by Nadim Zahawi, the newish Education Secretary. Mr. Zahawi will launch a major campaign in the coming days aimed at encouraging former school staff to sign up as supply teachers. This is amid concern in Whitehall. The number of teachers forced into isolation next month due to Omicron could lead to entire year groups being sent home or schools being closed. What do the teachers say about it? They seem fairly key in all of this. Jeff Barton is General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders. Okay, what do your colleagues, retired colleagues, do you think they're going to sign up for this? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, being a substitute teacher, a supply teacher, isn't an easy gig at the best of times. You go into a school you may not know, teaching young people you don't know, possibly teaching bits of the curriculum you've just had to put together quite quickly at the last minute. So quite whether the call to arms is going to entice them away from what they might be doing, which might be retirement or might be one-to-one tuition and all of that, whether they are going to want to step into schools in January as part of an army of supply teachers, there are big question marks. But at least there is a recognition that we didn't have last year from the Education Secretary, that you can't just talk about schools having business as usual without recognising that you have to have adults who are trained as teachers to be there. And therefore, at least we've got a dose of realism, which I think, being generous at the Christmas time, is a good notion.
If they don't go to the army of men and women who've been teachers before, I don't know where else they go there in reality, Jeff. They've got nowhere else to go, really, do they?
Well, I guess I'd probably start by saying what we're seeing at the moment is we've got 230,000 or so young people out of school, and we've got some teachers and teaching assistants out of school. We would hope that as we move into the Christmas holidays, many schools finishing today, that without 10 million young people mixing with all the rest of their young people on the buses and in school, that maybe we're catastrophising this. Maybe what we will see is that the majority of teachers, the majority of youngsters can have a kind of normality, and that this backup plan isn't actually needed. Now, I don't know, you don't know, but I think before we start giving a narrative to young people that they're going to be caught in the kind of cycle they were last year, which was pretty squalid, really, that we're going to do everything we can with personal responsibility to mix less, get jabbed, all the things around testing that are going to try and keep our schools as safe as possible and have some kind of normality in the new year.
Jeff Barton, thank you. Your General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders, 726. Let's go.
In 300 yards, at junction 3, take the A312 exit to Harrow, Hayes.
Right at the heart of it, next door to the constituency, I believe. Good morning.
That's right, Nick. Yeah, I live in the same village as the candidate Helen Morgan. Yeah, I'm not surprised, actually. I don't know anybody who is preparing to vote any other way other than...
Exit at junction 3.
I think it's very much not just about the party scandals and all the rest of it. I think it's about the way Shropshire has been left behind.
What do you mean? In what way do you feel the county has been left behind, Andy?
Really struggle. I have personal experience of a 9.5
In a quarter of a mile, at Cranford Parkway interchange, take the 4th exit onto the Parkway, A312.
I work as a volunteer at A&E. A&E is already stacked out without any further assistance from the virus. Any more problems, we've already got problems. And I just think really that Shropshire in itself is sending a very clear message. It's not so much about individual issues, it's about, I think it is time for Boris to go. I think we do not feel as a country like we're being led. And I think that's the long and short of it.
You have absolutely no need to answer this question, lastly, but would you normally have voted, a couple of years ago, voted Conservative, or you've never been a fan of the party?
I voted Conservative last time. Prior to that, I have voted for other parties. I was looking for someone who was brave enough to try and break the Brexit problem because I thought it was very damaging to the country. Or I might have overdone it by voting for someone who was a bit rash.
Thanks for the perspective right in the heart of the constituency, Andy. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Ali in Slough. Ali, good morning. You're on the radio. Your view on this?
Good morning.
Hello, mate.
I feel sorry for Boris. I think basically this earthquake that the papers are putting this across as some sort of message back to Boris. In terms of, I think for any prime minister to sit through a once in a century, once in a lifetime event, and for them to make tough decisions.
But Ali, you're right. Of course, COVID is no one's fault, but do you not manage the response to COVID? That's where he's come up short, surely. No one blames him for COVID, but we can blame him for his response to COVID.
Exit the roundabout onto the Parkway.
In terms of, we will never be able to know what the alternative is, right? So you'll never have any idea. There will never be a situation where we can play this out again in some different way.
Continue on the Parkway for 1 mile.
Some more people die.
We have candour, we have truth from the Prime Minister, because let's be honest with each other, I haven't been to Slough for some time, but major cities and towns are locked down effectively, but they can't bring themselves to say lockdown and don't have any parties because they've been caught on the hop having parties themselves. That's the truth.
Well, I think, look, the way I sort of see the lockdown in terms of, it's an absurd rule, what they said, which is, stay at home, but go to parties. I don't think that was done because they went to parties. It was because if they turn around and lock down the country like they did previously, it involves, reenacting, furlough schemes, helping the hospitality industry. And the question is, for a government, you have to sort of weigh up.
Yeah.
Do we go through that again and then have that burden on us? And at the same time, it's basically, it's one of those situations where it's very difficult to sort of, bring these policies back into place.
I hear what you say. Ali, thank you. Look after yourself. We'll continue this conversation. Also coming up after the news, first time in 3 years.
We're seeing more persistent inflation pressures now, and that's what we have to act on. We're concerned about inflation in the medium term, and we're seeing things now that can threaten that. So that's why we have to act.
Yes, an interest rate rise, but what will it mean for you? We'll have details on that. 7:30, breakfast with me, Nick Ferrari, here on LBC News, Simon Conway.
The Liberal Democrats have overturned a 23,000 Tory majority to win the North Shropshire by-election. Helen Morgan took the historically ultra-safe Conservative seat by nearly 6,000 votes. The Sun's associate editor, Trevor Kavanagh, has told Nick it's a heavy blow to the Prime Minister's authority.
This possibly is a tsunami which could sweep Boris away. I don't think he's going to be sacked immediately. I think that he will limp on for a little while. From my experience, I've never seen anything quite like this. I think that everything that he does from now on will be picked apart, and it's very difficult to see where he gets the traction to rebuild.
4 children, all believed to be related, have died in a fire at a house in Sutton in South London. Investigators are trying to establish how it started last night. Official figures show UK retail sales picked up pace in November. Volumes increased by 1.4% for the month, from a 0.8% increase in October. LBC weather, mostly dry and cloudy, some frost and fog in places, some sunshine for parts of Scotland, light winds for most, a high of 12 degrees.
LBC. Join me, Andrew Castle, here on LBC. It looks like there's tons of parties now, lots of them being investigated. The litany of inept management at the top of the government is so frightening for me. The immorality, the lack of morality, everything seems to be falling apart. It's pathetic. You in Downing Street, you're there breaking the rules which you have put in place for us. You are a disgrace. Join me, Andrew Castle, tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player, LBC.
I run a bike shop. I've been bringing in stock from the EU for years, and next year I want to be doing the same. The rules might be changing, but my business isn't. Before, you could delay your customs declarations, but from the 1st of January, you can't. You've got to do it when the goods enter the country. So I'm starting right now. To keep your business moving, visit gov.uk/import goods into UK.
We've loads of deals worth harvesting.